It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And of course, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well, Canada, the U.S., or beyond. It is great to have you here. So it's Friday, which means we're going to have a RealAg Issues Panel. We're going to discuss all the big issues of the week, what happened, what didn't, and what can we maybe expect in the upcoming weeks as well. Be joined by Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith, both of RealAgriculture. As well, we will be joined today by Meagan Murdoch of H&K Strategies. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok. Or you can call that RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. You dial that number, you press the number 3, and you leave me a message. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today on the show. We got economic news out of the U.S. What does it mean for central banks going forward? We're going to talk about what's happening in the broader commodity complex as well. Bill 97 pause in Ontario, as well as the Conservatives now pushing for maybe a second thought on what should happen with the clean fuel regulation. What does that mean for the fall session of Parliament when we hit the fall? That's all that and a whole lot more. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. We got a great issues panel here today. Looking forward to all the things we have to discuss. It's going to be a lot of fun. As always, let's bring in the panel up first. It's Lyndsey Smith coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you?
I'm doing well, but I am melting. We are on day number 4 of 30-some degrees, a whole bunch of humidity. It's hot.
You don't like humidity?
No, I don't actually. I'm well adapted to northern climates.
Oh, no, you're like you like Nordic climates.
I do. Yes, I think that it should only be over 25 degrees if I'm at the beach. Other than that, it should never be more than 20 or 22. You
should relocate to Finland. Yes,
I'm pretty sure that's where I was from many generations ago, and that's where I should go back. Anyway, It's too hot. It's too hot for the livestock. It's too hot for the plants. Yeah, it's too hot.
Now also a member of NATO, Finland as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Also joining us is RealAgriculture's Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, you're obviously not on a tractor. What's going on this week?
We've been busy spraying and catching up on the spraying front when the temperatures allow, as we also have heat warnings in place here and high humidex values in the high 30s Celsius. And so, yeah, it's been warm too. So we've been trying to get stuff done early in the day.
We're not getting any of this heat. What are you talking about? You like plus 30 this week?
I think the high today is 32 or 33 with a humidex of 38, something like that.
You're missing out
the last few
there.
days.
Yeah, well, first of all, we don't have humidity. 2, we have wind, and 3, it's like high of plus 15.
Does Alberta ever get humidity though? Versus Saskatchewan? I feel
Sometimes
like
in July, like during hail season.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's very firm humidity.
When you get precipitation in the form of ice.
Yeah. Then
we're actually anti-humidity because of humidity. We get those big hailstones. It comes
That's
with
true.
other things. So
been a lot of hot air in the legislature lately, though.
we need to talk about that.
Yeah,
Our
put it on the
reaction
list.
to that whole circus that happened this week. Also, Meagan Murdoch of H&K Strategies out of Toronto. Meagan, it's great to have you back.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to spend a Friday afternoon with you fine folks.
Yeah, what would you rather be doing? Like that's a very short list.
I would rather be at a Jays game. That's the only thing.
So would I, actually.
On the
So,
list
okay,
with
we're
you.
even there. So
yeah. And
Yeah,
if we were the Jays game with you guys, I mean, how amazing would that be?
One day.
yeah, like Sportsnet has that whole studio right on the main concourse. We could just, push Jamie Campbell aside and say, we're doing RealAg Radio. I'm sure that would go over really well.
Well, they need a coffee break. They could just go for like an hour. We can record a show and then they come back. What's wrong with that? It's efficient.
If you're looking for the answer to, with all the talk about artificial intelligence and AI and when will reporters be replaced, just look to Sportsnet and Rogers. They will be the first from a cost cutting standpoint to do that. As the Blue Jays radio play-by-play team continues to do road games from a studio in Toronto, which is just nuts based on
Just like the Leafs in the playoffs with their radio team too. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're doubling the cost of season tickets for next year for some sections. So yeah, times are tough over there at the Rogers Center, but nice renovations for sure. I had a buddy that was at the game yesterday. It says just beautiful. Okay, enough Blue Jays baseball and all the other things. Let's dig into it. Kelvin, economic news. We had a U.S. jobs report here this morning. Do you think that this is an indication of the Fed now pausing, or do you think rates are going higher?
Well, this would be another indicator on the side of rates going higher or the pause ending or not lasting as long as maybe earlier thought, as the U.S. Labor Department reported an increase, 339,000 added jobs in May. That's as they also revised March and April's totals higher. So unemployment rate, meanwhile, rose slightly, still near the historic low, though. It's at 3.7% for the month of May, up from 3.4% in April. So, but I think overall, again, some better than expected. And this comes in terms of overall economic numbers this week. We also saw GDP numbers from Canada here. And they were much higher than expected. Although, if you factor in immigration, a lot of this is being driven by increases in the size of the workforce through immigration. As the GDP number here in Canada this week came in at 3.1% for the first quarter, and the early estimates were 2.5%. Some of them were 2.3%, so way higher than that. But again, if you factor in immigration and look at GDP per capita, which is often associated or is used as a proxy for standard of living, kind of what each individual Canadian can afford on average, that's where the number isn't as positive as it was flat to even down slightly on a GDP per capita basis, given our high levels of immigration that continue.
Now, Meagan, this is the 14th time in the last 17 months that economists have underestimated what the jobs number would be in the U.S. It seems to be that the experts are underestimating the resilience of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, entirely. And I mean, Canada's not far behind what we're seeing in the U.S. I think we can expect to see to the same degree in Canada when the job numbers do come out, I think next week. We have been seeing job growth, and that should be alarming to anyone at the Bank of Canada. And some economists are saying, economists at Scotiabank, for example, have said, now is the time for the Bank of Canada to adopt a killer approach to actually crush this. Because if they do not act and act now, we will never get back to, 2% inflation.
So being hawkish is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Being aggressive on trying to get down, because clearly, I mean, job numbers tell us that their actions to date aren't really impacting our commercial kind of approach in Canada. Like, they need to do something that's really gonna settle investment and spending.
Okay, so that's one side. And Lyndsey, what I find very interesting about this whole discussion is you've got some hawkish comments, like Meagan just talked about from Scotiabank. There are others believe that the Bank of Canada and the Fed needs to keep on going, but there are others that believe that wait here, you need to pause, and we need to just see what happens with some of the data, and possibly even see rate decreases. Maybe in at some point in the last quarter of 23 into the Q1 of 24, we've got copper being weak, crude oil has not exactly been strong, Chinese manufacturing numbers weak this week. So there you can build the argument on that side as well. How do you sort of put this puzzle together to try to interpret it?
I listen to a lot of interviews of much smarter people than me, so I do that in that exactly that. So we do have a bit of a divergence here, where we sort of felt, if we go back even just a couple of months, we were talking very much about, hey, this all was working out, we're good, we're gonna, things are gonna align, and we're going to pause, and everything's going to be fine. And now we really have this divergence that almost feels a little, that's getting wider, where you've got a couple people that are really like, no, we've got to hammer at this. And then the others who are like, wait, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So, I've been listening, all week to the show, and certainly we heard from Errol Anderson on, crude oil really leading this downward move, China moving into recession, really not positive news. And I will say, for all of it, the one thing that, of course, that I think each of us understands intrinsically is, of course, just the cost of living and the cost of borrowing. And realistically, have we fully seen the impact of the increase in these rates really on the everyday? I think that is what we will see in the next 3 to 6 months. So that may have some pretty significant impacts here, sort of last half of 23.
I went through this yesterday. You remember that? What game show was it where you could call a friend? What was that?
Millionaire.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
So,
yeah, did you call a friend?
I did. I called Kelvin. And I was trying to figure out what to do with the mortgage. And I was like, do I do 1 year? Do I do 2 years, 3 years? The bank. So I'll say this. The bank was trying to get me to do, they were saying do 3. I ended up doing 2.
Yeah. Well, so, and here's our disclaimer. Shaun is not telling you what to do with your mortgage here in Canada.
But it's
exactly
easier to talk about it than actually have to make the decision, is what I said.
Exactly, because it's and so we had to do the same thing a couple months ago. It's like, making these decisions is actually very difficult, especially if you're following along, in that although either way it hurts. The rate changes hurt regardless, but yeah, trying to make that call.
Timing is a big question now. Like, even from a couple months ago, how long you'd want to go out with a mortgage when there was talk about rates going down by the end of the year, or potentially cuts happen, change in direction, and now that talk has disappeared. So that timeline for how long you'd like to lock in your rates. And again, this is something where Canada and US lending markets differ, where US borrowers usually lock in rates for a much longer time frame. But in Canada, do you want to do 1, 2, 3, 5, 10? What's it going to, like, how long is this increasing rate environment going to last?
Sorry, go ahead, Meagan, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it hasn't impacted consumer spending to date. Consumer spending is still strong, and actually the real estate market is heating up again.
It is.
So
on the residential, commercial is starting to break, I think.
Commercials in the US?
Yeah.
And Canada too, though. I was listening this week, I heard a report about the federal government is looking to divest like 40% of its real estate, essentially its office buildings. Because of the work from home. And that is going to have now there are buildings, I'm sure, that are sort of at the end of their life cycle. They've probably, they've been depreciated off the books, whatever. But there's going to be some like, think about how that shifts, and we've seen some of it, but think about how that shifts different economies of if people are at home versus downtown or in, centers with high rises, whatever, it completely changes the ebb and flow of economics of certain areas. So,
But
yeah.
Meagan, you're right, though. Residential is heating up.
Again.
Yeah,
Which
good,
blows
good
my
story in the
mind.
Globe this morning about that. I mean, in Toronto, they were focusing on the Toronto market.
Yeah. So you have to, I guess the challenge is you have to act now for something that you can't see in the numbers for probably 6 months.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the argument is, sure, we can keep pausing and we can wait to see the numbers, but it will be too late then to make a substantial impact. The hurt will have been, it wouldn't have been worth it because it won't really in the end do what it needed to do.
Okay, let's take a break. I want to play a clip when we get back, talking about the other side of this. Errol Anderson, who Lyndsey mentioned, believes the other direction has to happen with rates, and we'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Want to get the best out of your soybean crops? Whether you've been growing them for a generation or are just starting into soybeans, find what you need to know at soybeanschool.com. You'll see videos on growing tips, pest control, and much more from specialists across the region, all in one place. Easy for you to access from your desktop, tablet, or mobile phone. Maximize your yields by staying up to date with the Soybean School, presented by BASF, Pride Seeds, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on the RealAg Issues Panel. Hey, Lyndsey, did you just have a birthday?
I did, about a month ago.
Yeah. Are you 50?
Shut up. I am a whole 2 weeks older than you. 2 whole weeks.
Oh, I could have sworn you were older. Okay, well, you know what? Alpine's older than us.
Much older.
Yes. Alpine brand liquid fertilizers, they're turning 50 this year. From the beginning, we have always applied the 4R principles to the right approach to fertilizer industry with the right source, right rate, right place, and, of course, right time. Alpine's committed to Canadian farmers, always delivering the highest quality liquid products, including their patented award-winning Bio-K line of nutrients. To find out more, visit them at alpinepfl.com. That is alpinepfl.com. Or you can call 1-800-265-2268 today. I could have sworn you were fit. Okay. I thought you were older. Never mind. Okay. Let's get to more of these issues here. I want to play a clip that we heard earlier this week on RealAg Radio. And it was Errol Anderson of Pro Market Wire talking about his concerns about the global economy. And I think this transitions very nicely into concerns about the broader ag commodity complex and what happens going forward. Let's hear what Errol had to say.
Now, what we're having right now, Shaun, is that we're having a commodity pullback generally, and this is global. So this isn't just in the United States and Canada. This is a global pullback, and where we're seeing it coming from is really the slowdown in China. And today, for instance, we just had renewed information from China on their manufacturing, and it was a big miss. So China, I believe, is actually going into some form of a recession. And China, basically purchases over 50% of global commodities. So we have to really respect that. And that's why we're seeing a downturn currently.
Uh-oh. That's not good, Lyndsey.
50% of global commodities?
Wow.
Right? So this is that number alone, or just the entire discussion, like it does put into perspective why we talk about China so much, why China entering a market or exiting a market has such a huge impact. We do, certainly in Canada, we talk about so much about how we want to sort of, give ourselves some distance or not be so reliant on certain markets or whatever, but it's a gigantic market. Like, we cannot downplay that. And so it becomes just such an indicator of the cascading effect of if China decides it doesn't need X or it can't afford Y, and those are things that we sell. And just globally, like, just to think about a player that large perhaps shifting its spending across the commodities is really quite, the impact is just massive. So what happens next, I don't know, but yeesh, not a great picture from Errol.
Yeah. Kelvin, how do you respond to that?
Well, I guess I see it also through the lens, both personally and kind of industry wide, of I think there's a lot of farms that have a lot less sold and have a lot less of both of old crop and some old crop left over, more old crop left over than normal at this time, and also less new crop sold priced at this time. And so that's where I know I'm not in the thin minority of hoping that we do see a turnaround in this narrative, and that whether it's weather related or we saw heavy rains and flooding in China this week that is potentially damaging the wheat crop there. I know that those of us who are in a less sold position than what we have been in the past at this point are hoping that things turn around.
Yeah, we saw that with our, it's a poll, it's not a survey, whatever, but that was just a couple weeks ago, and the most common was farmers had sold almost nothing, and this was new crop, but almost nothing, or more than 50%. So there was a huge gap there in what farmers actually have priced, and that's concerning.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like are kicking themselves for not having sold that price in March, where it had come down $2 from where it was in January. We thought, well, it's got to go back to where it was, and now here we are, another $2 lower or whatever it is. So it depends on the crop, but yeah, a lot of people kicking themselves that we haven't sold more if it's coming along.
Our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, has been following this in September, and it's exactly what we've seen. Kelvin, you and I have been kind of talking about this for about 10 days now. We had heard from some people in the grain industry that there was still 30% of the 22 crop wheat still in the bin. When I first heard that, I was like, what? Like, come on. Everybody I followed up with, that number's being confirmed.
Yeah, and we ran some of the numbers in terms of comparing StatsCan's estimates of the overall crop size last year and how much has been exported versus in the Canadian Grain Commission data. Sure, we've exported way more grain this year than we did last year at this point, but we also had a much larger crop. And percentage-wise, what were the numbers, Shaun? I think it was 26, 27, 28% of the crop is yet to come. I know it's not comparing exactly apples to apples if you're comparing Grain Commission versus StatsCan data, but it does look like there is still a fair bit of grain that hasn't entered the system. Either that or the crop size was overestimated and has yet to be corrected.
Meagan, you mentioned the hot air in Ottawa at the beginning of the panel.
Edmonton.
And all over Alberta.
And Ottawa. Yeah, exactly. But
you guys, you know what? Alberta, everybody likes to, they think they're like picking on Alberta, but we're so comfortable in our own skin.
Oh, you're okay with it.
We're good.
Yeah.
How do we feel about what we saw in the House of Commons this week? Where we just when you think there's kind of like a new the interaction between the Prime Minister and Mr. Poilievre going back and forth about who's had a real job, who hasn't. Poilievre bringing up, I guess, I don't know how to describe, why the Prime Minister left being a teacher. It just feels, Meagan, like, I know this is really good social media fodder, but is this actually what Canadians want out of interaction between politicians at a time where there's so much concern about the cost of living?
Yeah, it's a great question. For those who missed the interaction, Poilievre made as he always does, a pretty good quip about the Prime Minister having been a teacher previously, or a drama teacher, as people like to think about. And then to his credit, the Prime Minister replied quite quickly and said that he couldn't remember the job that Poilievre had before joining politics, which of course is speaking to the fact that Poilievre has always been in politics for, the majority of his career. So it's an interesting debate. But to your question, I mean, I'm just not sure that the average Canadian's watching QP like we are. I don't think they're really taking that much notice when they're, trying to figure out how to pay for the rising cost of groceries. They're, working to get their kids to, their sports or activities after school. They're just, trying to make ends meet. It's probably largely irrelevant until, an election comes along, right? As we saw in Alberta this week. And then, in the final weeks, people start paying attention. So we have a Toronto mayoral election happening right now. And, I don't think broadly many people are paying too much attention, but they will maybe in the final weeks and days and then make a decision on what they think is best.
And isn't there like 50 candidates for that Toronto mayor job?
There's a lot.
There's a lot. I think they like may have maxed out like close to 100, but yeah, the cutoff I think has brought it down. But there's only
a lot.
There's only 3 or 4 candidates who can truly win, and Olivia Chow, the former federal member of parliament for the NDP, is in the polls, is leading head and shoulders above anyone else, and unfortunately her competitors are splitting the rest of the vote. So it will be very interesting to see if any of them step back and out and try to consolidate their votes towards a candidate that's not Olivia Chow. But that's
is Anthony Furey one of those? Is he in the running there?
He is, yeah. I wouldn't say he's at the top. The most competitive to Chow, though off still by a ways, is Mark Saunders, the previous chief of police, and Anna Bailao, who is a former councillor and deputy mayor.
Kelvin, what's your reaction to what you saw this week in QP?
So I do actually think, to Meagan's point about some of these things mattering in an election, we actually have a by-election underway in our riding here right now. There's 5 by-elections happening across the province, but we're here in Portage Lisgar. We have Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, running. And I do think a clip like what we saw in the House of Commons appeals to PPC voters. And I do think that Poilievre is bringing some PPC voters back into the conservative vote camp. Here in Portage Lisgar, we had the highest PPC support, I believe, in the country, maybe second highest in the country in the 2021 election. That's one of the reasons why Bernier is running here. And I do think that one of the big factors that has changed, that is going to challenge that support this time around, it was at 22% votes for the People's Party last time around. Was still, the Conservatives were way ahead, 12,000 votes, I believe, was the margin still. But I do think that one of the things that's changed, Aaron O'Toole was a Conservative leader at that time, and now Poilievre is the leader, and his interactions and his style, I think, appeal to a lot of those PPC voters. And so that's where I do wonder whether, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I do think like Poilievre is in our riding today, and the questions he's being asked are about Bernier, and he's going right after Bernier. So I do think that is on his mind right now. The threat from the PPC's flank, the more right flank of the Conservative Party. I do think there is some attention being paid to that right now.
And here's the risk in all of this. Good strategy. Here's the risk in all of this, Lyndsey, is that, O'Toole found it out, Scheer found it out, Jason Kenney found it out. The more of that PPC base that you try to lure into the more mainstream, the harder it is to govern once you do actually become the leader.
And how about Danielle Smith? I mean, it can be argued she moved to a more mainstream approach in this election, and she had to, because Notley was like, nipping at her heels. But when she went into that debate, she took a much more reserved, pragmatic approach. And people say that was the turning point where she was able to, really push ahead and as we saw, win.
It's something like 10 or 20% of UPC supporters believe that she won't make the next election. Lyndsey.
So what was it? Yeah, there was an article, I think, in the line that either she's in for 18 months and out, or she's in for the next 8 years. It's sort of either she's going to be a flash in the pan here, or she's the next Ralph Klein. So a few things to pull together from this, and this is where Poilievre, I think, when we look at something like question period, we all know he's great as leader of the opposition. He's quick on his feet. He's an attack dog. He has
his microphone drop.
Exactly. I'm sure he probably practices this all at home and is like, that's the one. I'm going with that one. But is that going to make a prime minister? If I look at something like the childishness of, making fun of people's past jobs or all that sort of stuff, frankly, I think both of them deserve a timeout. I mean, that's not leadership. That's not trying to get this country back on track economically. That's not taking anything seriously. And then we've got, yes, the Maxime Bernier piece that he's then trying to make sure that, he shows up and keeps those, that splinter part of right-wingers in the Conservative House. All those things, realistically, when we get to a federal election, I don't know how you pull all that back, how you stop the pit bull and the quips and the whatever and start to actually put together what people want to actually hear and what resonates with them. And that's what he's going to have to do, and it's going to be hard.
I don't know that he will.
No,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Meagan, I don't think he
won't
will.
need to do that, Lyndsey, is my argument.
You don't think he'll need to?
No, he'll just need to be an alternative to the prime minister who, has run the course of any prime minister, who's made enough decisions to have enough enemies out there, and Canadians will be looking for a change. Poilievre will need to stick to his own message. He'll need to reinforce that, we don't need another 4 years of Trudeau. And, I don't think he'll have to do too much except for stay, away from, putting his foot in it. He'll just have to run a clean right.
And
it's what
this
Trudeau
is where
did to Harper. That's exactly what Trudeau did.
Exactly, that is. And we do typically vote people out versus in.
Correct.
At the same time, the smartest thing the Liberals could do would be to have somebody else than Justin Trudeau run. And he's already said he's running. So if the Liberals really wanted to stay in power, which it is an aging government for sure, they would swap out their leader, because you're absolutely right, Meagan.
We got to take a break. We have to break here. Rural Radio is going to get upset. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
3, 2, and 1. Kelvin, do you like spending time in your shop in the wintertime?
I do, yes.
Yeah?
Definitely. Yeah.
What's your favorite
Wish
shop
I could spend more time on it. In winter?
Yeah.
Well, usually it just involves feeling the sense of accomplishment when you actually get something fixed that you need to work on, but also organizing the shop is something that I wish I had more time to do, because our shop's in desperate need of some time invested in that.
It's sort of like my 19-year-old's bedroom. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, probably.
Like,
yeah, with 19 years of stuff being thrown into shelves and stuff like that. Well, it's been cleaned since then, but it's
I promise you have less empty beer cans in your shop than he does in his bedroom. Why I bring up shops, because there's a lot of cool ones across this country and we want to feature them. So Princess Auto is sponsoring a new series, and it's great to have Princess Auto on board with RealAgriculture.com. It's called RealAg Shops. So we're going to go across Canada, and we're going to remember the show MTV Cribs, like where Snoop Dogg or maybe like
Luda. Was it Ludacris? No, who was the host?
Ludacris, Neil
I forget
Young.
which rapper it was.
Yeah, they just sort of take you around their place in Beverly Hills. We want you to take us around your shop out there in rural Canada. So if you do have a cool shop, no, it doesn't need to be like, the mother lode of all shops, where it doesn't need to be something that, you've spent millions and millions on. It can just be a cool shop that you've really, really done some neat stuff with and had some cool innovations. We want to hear from you. Please reach out. SHaney@RealAgriculture.com is my email. All shapes and sizes of shops welcome.
It was Exhibit. Exhibit was the rapper.
Oh,
can you spell that, please?
Do we have our own version?
I'm just kidding.
Of Exhibit to visit everybody's.
Do we have
shop?
Yeah.
Kind of Exhibit like. He had some really good songs.
You are?
No, I
Shaun
don't.
is Exhibit like.
No, he had some good songs though. I like Exhibit.
Then I want to be.
He had that show. What was it called on where you Hit My Ride?
Yes.
Wasn't Exhibit the host of that Pit My Ride?
Oh, I thought it was MTV Cribs. Maybe both of them. I don't know.
No, there was Cribs where you the door would open and somebody would lead you around.
Oh yes.
Then there was the
Exhibit had the Pimp My Ride, where you would bring your old vehicle in there and then he would take you through the process of like
that's where I'm mixing that up. Yeah, you're right.
Adding the hydraulics. That's the important part.
Okay. Let's get to the topics. Kelvin, Bunge and Viterra. You have been checking on this from the Competition Bureau's standpoint. We did see the Canada Pension Plan and the BC Pension Fund. They showed support this week. What do you think is going to happen with the Competition Bureau?
Well, Competition Bureau is definitely going to review it. They won't comment specifically on this proposed transaction as it's still just being reported. There is nothing on the record. Even the pension plan funds wouldn't comment on the record. That's all being reported by sources like the Globe and Mail. With their anonymous sources that they're talking to, that they are supporting it. But the Competition Bureau, we did communicate with them this week. They basically said any deal of this value would require notification ahead of time, but they can't say at this point, it's confidential whether they've received that notification from the companies. And so, we're basically in wait and see mode right now. Again, Viterra or Glencore, its parent company, and Bunge are both large corporate companies that are pretty tight-lipped when it comes to communications, especially when it comes to something sensitive like a potential merger here. So, still waiting to hear more details, but there is some reporting that an announcement could be made in the next few weeks, but we'll wait and see.
Meagan, do you think that we're going to see? Because I read an article this morning in the Wall Street Journal talking about the broader corporate, the corporate world, saying that mergers and acquisitions have actually been quite slow as of late, and there's not a lot of sign of recovery in that market. Do you think that we're going to see more of this? Like, I sort of think like monkey see, monkey do, where we see one sort of piece of M&A activity in a sector, and then we sort of, there's another one, because people feel they have to compete. Do you think we're going to see more of this?
I don't know. Honestly, I thought that we would see a lot more mergers and acquisitions kind of post-pandemic. As companies kind of came through the other side, they would, look towards what was next. We really haven't seen that. IPOs were going wild in 2020 and 2021, and they've cooled down as well. I mean, in terms of the industry itself, I mean, there's not much more mergers and acquisitions that can really happen, Shaun. I mean, there's only so many big players out there at this point. Interesting to see that Glencore is offloading, or looking to offload Viterra so quickly. It was, 2013, I believe, 2011, when, the wheat board changes were made, and this happened around that same time. And now they appear to be offloading their agriculture and shifting their strategy towards just mining as they go after tech
resources.
So, it's a strategy play as far as I can see. It's not, anything more than that. They're refining their own strategy, and this is the best way to get some of the value out of that Viterra deal that they did not that long ago.
You mentioned the wheat board, though. That's one area the Competition Bureau is going to be paying attention to, because the privatized wheat board is 25, which is a form of G3. We know it as G3 now, is 25% owned by Bunge. So that's where G3 and Viterra elevators could be a Competition Bureau sensitive area that they're going to look at. But I on the topic of mergers and acquisition trends, though, Shaun, I do wonder in agriculture, with tightening margins and increasing borrowing costs, those types of things could drive companies into looking at options for partnering up and working together.
Well, we've seen some of the frustrations of the Syngenta IPO, that's been delayed and in trouble. So there's just another example.
Yeah, if we see higher interest rates and bigger debt on the balance books, some will be easy picking for others as well to come in and make a play for them.
Lyndsey, Bill 97, Ontario government, they're doing the moonwalk. They're walking it back.
Walking it back. It's like, hey, we're gonna do this. No, we're not. Yeah. So this is now we'll wait and see how this all actually plays out in here in Ontario. But Bill 97 did have language in it that would have allowed for up to 3 severances off of any piece of farmland. So no requirement that the farmland be a certain size. So we could be, if it's designated farmland, it could have 3 severances off of it. OFA, so the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, said, whoa, what the heck? How are we going to meet our zoning requirements as far as, or our siting requirements for livestock operations? This is going to cause a huge issue for traffic and our roads, and several different, I think there was a total of 12 producer groups got together and said, yes, this does not need to be in this bill. We can address housing other ways. So the Ford government has heard that and says they're going to walk that back. Now, there's still a few things in the bill that the producer groups are concerned about, including the ministerial zoning orders that do have a lot of latitude in skipping over some of the protections that are in place if they want to rezone things. So there's still some controversy over what's in this bill, but it looks like the 3 severances per piece of farmland is going to come out of Bill 97. So
sometimes things work out.
Sometimes they do. I got to tell you, what was interesting is on social media, I had several conversations. Most people sort of in principle were like, understood, this is a bad idea. But there were a few discussions that, what about for multi-generational farms? If we're limited in severances, are we limited in housing? So if you've got a second or third generation that wants to be on the farm, can you build on the house? So we still need to have provisions within our rules and regulations to make sure that you can add, say, a granny suite or a second residence or whatever. And that is important. But the whole severances thing felt like far too much of a blanket sort of general, hey, what do we do with this? That had way too many opportunities to go sideways and not actually meet the needs of people they're trying to actually help out. So definitely we need a way to add housing within a farming unit, but we really don't need 3 severances off of every piece of farmland.
Not solving the housing crisis in Ontario by going about it that way, in my opinion. Let's take a break. We've got the Conservatives continuing to push forward on trying to cancel the clean fuel regulation. What does that mean for biofuels? And will this be one of the big stories in the back half of 23? You're listening to RealAg Radio, RealAg Issues Panel. We'll be right back right after this. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on the RealAg Issues Panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture, as well as Meagan Murdoch from H&K Strategies. Okay, we are covering all the big issues of the week. I did mention that the Conservatives they're upping their pressure. This isn't just something it appears they're going to talk a little bit about. They're actually going to try to maybe push a stop to the clean fuel regulation, which involves a real push in Canada for things like renewable diesel, if I can get that out, and sustainable aviation fuel. Kelvin, I guess one thing, Conservatives getting louder about it, farm groups very quiet in the rebuttal, especially on the canola side.
Yeah, that's it's quite accurate assessment, I'd say, of the situation, and that is because it is a politically sensitive issue right now. I think farm groups are laying low, the ones that were lobbying for it a few years ago when government was proposing and drafting this clean fuel regulation that's set to take effect here in less than a month. But we did see the Conservatives introduce a motion in the House of Commons yesterday, and it was debated. So there's a lot of discussion in question period yesterday about this motion from the Conservatives to cancel or to withdraw plans for this clean fuel regulation. They're calling it carbon tax 2, or the second carbon tax. They're not framing it as clean fuel regulation. And Minister Bibeau tried drawing attention to the fact that this is positive for canola farmers yesterday, and that didn't seem to go very far in terms of counter arguments. So, but that is a dilemma that we've talked about here before, and I think we continue to deal with it in agriculture, where from a principal perspective, sure, we don't want to pay more for fuel and have this additional tax, so-called tax on added to the price of fuel if this makes it cost more. But then you also have the benefits. Look at the RFS in the US and 36 or 40% of US corn crop going into fuel, and what that's done to agricultural commodity markets and how we've benefited in Canada. Producers around the world have seen higher prices over the last couple decades due to that policy. Here we are on principle arguing against it, and also not recognize or kind of having a disconnect here between the pros and cons of this policy.
First of all, those farm groups are clearly on the record on what their position is. So you're
yeah, but right now, farm group, it's all membership driven and checkoff driven. That's sensitive area to if your membership is in favor or is against a policy, to take an opposite position right now. I think that's where we're treading into dangerous territory and why they're laying low.
No doubt there is a clear, my experience has been clear difference between attitude towards biofuels south of the border versus north of the border. And as farmers fall into the narrative that this is going to raise my fuel prices, I don't care about the increased canola demand. Farmers in North Dakota, I'm going to speculate, feel very much the opposite. So it's interesting to see the divergence of views here.
I'm surprised we haven't seen some pushback on the idea that it's going to raise fuel prices as well, because in the US, the argument is that it's not more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
That is like that where ethanol isn't.
And ethanol is a big part of the Ontario market as well. I mean, a huge portion of the Ontario corn crop goes for ethanol as well. Like this isn't, and so I think there's even a divergence between the West and the East, to be honest. And we don't have time to talk about it today, but at some point we could also be talking about using milk permeate to make ethanol. So heck, there's so much cool stuff that we could do. So I understand nobody wants to pay more for fuel per se, and there are those that on principle don't want more government involvement, etc. But I do struggle with, at least from the agriculture perspective, I think there are some real positives here that, you know, as an industry we can support. But
and if we see canola go in the tank, let's just say it really tanks.
Like the proverbial tank, not the
like
gas
doesn't
tank.
go in the tank.
Yeah, it tanks price-wise.
Does that, you know, that we've had some pretty lofty canola prices the past 3 years. So it's like, yeah, who cares about increased demand? Like it's canola.
Right. Some of that's been driven by anticipation of renewable diesel demand.
Yeah, exactly. that is true as well. Meagan, interesting story in the Globe talking about, well, I guess putting some context around global carbon emissions. What stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, they have an interesting story, as you say, where they compared, you know, really the group of 7, the G7 countries, and their emissions, and essentially, you know, outlines what I think we all know is that when compared to China, you know, Canada is nowhere to be found, really, when we're talking about this. So, you know, it just really crystallizes in some great data and charts as to how, you know, the developing world is tracking in terms of their carbon production. and really who needs to do the heavy lifting going forward.
Yeah, that we're almost, it makes you question, why are we punishing ourselves with some of the increased costs, like something like a carbon tax, doesn't it?
Yeah, entirely. And I mean, it does make me think about the debate we were just having around the clean fuel and, whether we move towards biofuels and, just that divergence of opinions on how we tackle this larger problem. Even in our own agriculture industry, we don't have a common view as to how we can move forward in a really economically effective and effective for our climate way, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Lyndsey, interesting report from the Saskatchewan Stockgrowers Association. We're going to have Gunnar Diebold on the show, I think, next week.
I think so.
It has to do with conservation easements, but it's really kind of comparing what you can make off cropland versus what you can make off of pasture.
Mm-hmm. And Kelvin did some of the reporting here, and we're going to continue to dig into it because there is actually quite a bit here on trying to compare, what you can make off of Saskatchewan farmland in a grain rotation versus a cow-calf operation. And I don't think anyone's surprised that the grain rotation is going to make you more money. The argument, though, is if we're serious about conserving our grasslands, which is incredibly important actually to the prairie ecosystem, if we're and carbon as a whole, if we want to even take it that far, but I would even start just preserving grasslands, we need this, then if we're serious about that, then realistically, we have to make sure our cow-calf producers can be competitive so that we're not taking more land out of production. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if I've got a mortgage to pay and I've got land that could be making me $500 more per acre, I'm more inclined to be growing, durum and lentils and these sorts of things that can make me more money. Now, notwithstanding, we are, of course, right now in perhaps a cattle super cycle, which could change some of these economics, at least in the short term. But in the long term, if, as a nation and as a province, Saskatchewan if we are serious about conserving grasslands, we're going to have to shift how we value them and how we have things like conservation easements, et cetera, and the value of them. So we'll be, I am lining up interviews for the Tuesday show. So we'll be talking more about this next week.
Yeah, I really don't, when you think about a term conservation easement of like 25, 30 years, that seems like a really long time. When we're talking about conservation easements around the idea of perpetuity, which is forever.
In which case they have to make money. Like, it has to make sense in order to commit to that, right?
Forever's a long time.
And right now, those easements are being negotiated based on a fair market value approach, which is based on what land nearby sold for, kind of thing. And that's where this report this week from the stock growers shows that might not be the best way to assess the future value of a piece of land.
Well, you're selling a conservation easement in perpetuity, and it's 30% of the value of the land price today. 5 years from now, not such a good deal on that 30% because it's 30% of the 5 years ago. So there's some work to be done here. Hey, we're out of time. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone else as well.
Lyndsey, enjoy the humidity and don't get too frizzy.
Yeah, look it. Anyway, for everyone watching video.
Meagan, enjoy the Blue Jays game. I think that's where you're headed, right?
I'm gonna try.
Okay, get down there. If I lived 10 minutes from Rogers Center, Kelvin is the same. We would be there every day.
They would have an office there.
We would have an office.
I would do the show from there.
Yeah, they would do the show.
This summer, we can do it.
If anybody has any feedback on all the different topics we talked about today, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we will see you again all on Monday. Cheers, everybody.